The Buddha says that awakened people feel pain, and unawakened people feel pain. So what's the difference? He gives an analogy. He says with most people, you feel a pain that's like being shot with one arrow, but then you shoot yourself with a second arrow. You get upset, you get distraught. You beat your breast, he says. Where awakened people just have the first arrow. Just the arrow, the pain. They don't get upset. That second arrow stands for the suffering covered in the Four Noble Truths. That's the suffering we can do something about. That's the suffering that weighs down the mind. Without that suffering, the pain comes, the pain goes, the mind doesn't suffer. After all, the Buddha had backaches, suffered from other pains. But he didn't suffer. He just had the pains, experienced them, and they went past. That's the skill we're trying to develop. When the Buddha talks about the suffering the Four Noble Truths, it's the clinging to the aggregates. Clinging, he says, is desire and passion. It's focused on form of the body, feelings, perceptions, thought constructs, acts of consciousness. And it comes from craving. Craving, too, is desire and passion. The relationship between the two is like this. Craving, or the word for craving in Pali, is thirst. The word for clinging, upadana, is to feed. So it's the desire and passion that's looking for something, that's the craving that causes suffering. And it lands on something, feeds on it. And we tend to think that by feeding we gain pleasure, we gain satisfaction. But in the feeding, there's a lot of suffering. Look at a dog that's eating, especially a stray dog that's caught something. So he's afraid that people are going to take it away. There is that fear in what we're feeding on, because it's always changing, it's always going away. So we hold on even more tight. And there's the suffering. We hold on in terms of our sensual fantasies. We hold on in terms of our views about the world, our ideas of how things should and shouldn't be done, and our sense of self. When you talk about these things, people say, oh yes, I do hold on to those things. But you can't imagine not holding on to them. But the Buddha is saying, look at what you're holding on to. Look carefully at what you're holding on to. Those things are made out of those five aggregates. When you look at them in those terms, then you see it's a lot more ephemeral, something that can't provide real satisfaction. That's when you're going to be more inclined to want to let go. That's when you look to the path. Because the path shows by getting rid of the desire and passion of the craving, to get rid of the suffering. And so the path involves getting the mind into concentration to see these things clearly. That brings up two other points. That image of the two arrows, when you look at other parts of the canon, you realize that the image of the second arrow is not complete. One, there's not only one second arrow, you keep shooting yourself again and again and again. That's what clinging means. Even though these things add to the suffering, you find some satisfaction, or you feel some need to keep shooting yourself again and again. It's like an addiction. You find some pleasure even though there's a lot of suffering goes along with it. A lot of times you tend to deny the suffering. This is one of the reasons why good solid concentration is an important part of the path. You can't just be mindful of things, you have to get the mind really settled in. So it's willing to see things, see what's going on. The other point is that, in line with dependent co-arising, we don't shoot ourselves with the second arrow after the first arrow, or only after the first arrow. We also shoot ourselves before, in preparation. As you look at dependent co-arising, there are a lot of factors that come before sensory contact, before the feeling. And if those factors are done in ignorance, they prime us to suffer no matter what comes in at the stage of contact or feeling. One of the main factors at the very beginning, right after ignorance, is fabrication. This is another reason why we practice concentration. We want to get to the mind before it feels different pains, so it's primed not to suffer. Now, with fabrication, if you're doing it in ignorance, it's priming it to suffer. And what are the fabrications? There's the in and out breath, that's bodily fabrication. There's verbal fabrication, which is directed thought and evaluation. In other words, the way you talk to yourself, you choose a topic to focus on, and then you ask questions, make comments, explore the topic. Speak to yourself in full sentences, either questions or answers. And then there's then there's mental fabrication, perceptions and feelings. Perceptions are the labels you put on things, identifying what they are, what they mean, and how important they are. Like with the traffic light, if it's red, you identify it as red. You identify that red means stop. And if you know your traffic laws, you know that you've got to give some importance to that red light, otherwise you're in trouble. But we apply the same perceptions to ourselves, to our minds, to our bodies, labeling things inside. And then there are the feelings we focus on inside. Because fabrication comes first, before contact. If you get to be knowledgeable about what you're doing, and you can prime it so that when the contact comes, you're not going to shoot yourself with that second arrow. You're going to hold back, at the very least. Here again, this is why we get the mind into concentration. One, to get the mind still enough to see these things clearly. And two, to create a sense of well-being, that feeling and mental fabrication. Think back to the discussion of feeling in right mindfulness. The Buddha talks about feelings of pleasure, pain, neither pleasure nor pain. And then he divides feelings into two sorts. Feelings of the flesh, which are basically pleasures, pains, neutral feelings that just naturally happen at the senses. And then feelings not of the flesh. Those don't just happen on their own. Those are things that you intentionally create. And sometimes the intentions may be buried. Sometimes we create feelings of pain going through our body without realizing what we're doing. But with concentration, you can create feelings of pleasure. As the Buddha says, you breathe in a way that gives rise to rapture, gives rise to pleasure. Breathe in a way that makes you sensitive to the whole body. And you allow the rapture and pleasure to go through the whole body. As you think of the energy flow that allows these feelings to flow. When you've got feelings like this, you can carry them around with you. Then when pains come, you have an alternative. You don't have to focus on the pain. You've got something better to focus on. So you don't feel entirely consumed by the pain. A lot of people, when they get a pain someplace in the body, find that the pain fills the whole body. Well, that's a bad habit. If you have an alternative center to focus, you can make that pleasurable. Then you have another place to stand in the body. You realize it's not the case that the whole body is consumed. So John Lee said, if the whole body were consumed with pain, you'd be dead. There's got to be some place in the body where you can create a sense of ease. Some place in the breath. When we talk about the breath, we're talking about the flow of energy through the body and around the body. Sometimes when things are bad in the body, you can go to the sense of the energy cocoon around the body. Hang out there. When the sense of space that surrounds the body permeates the body, you can focus on these things. Create a pleasure not of the flesh that gives you an alternative to focusing on whatever pains may come up through the other senses. That's one of the reasons why we practice concentration in order to see things. One, to get the mind still enough to see things clearly. to provide it with a sense of well-being that allows you to step back from the pain, not be consumed by it. And then 3, when you're creating a state of concentration, you're dealing directly with these 3 kinds of fabrication. So you're focused on the breath as your topic. Well, that's bodily fabrication. You talk to yourself about how the breath is going, how the mind fits with the breath, how the breath fits with the mind. Where they don't fit, what changes need to be made. You change the way you breathe, the rhythm of the breath, in long, out long, in short, out short, in long, out short, in short, out long, heavy, light, fast, slow. You can talk about the texture of the breath, whether it's smooth or rough, coarse or refined. And then you can adjust these things. That's part of the evaluation as well. That's part of verbal fabrication too. And then with mental fabrication, you've got the perceptions of the breath, where the breath flows in the body, how it flows, where it comes in, where it goes out, where it starts. Does it start at one point outside, come in? Does it come in from all directions into the body as you breathe in? Or does the breath start in the body itself? After all, we see breath as the energy. Well, the energy is in here. Where's the signal that tells you now to breathe in, now to breathe out? Where does that first get started? 1 spot in the body? 2? Many spots? Every cell? Lots of different ways you can perceive the breath energy in the body, and lots of different ways you can perceive where your mind is focused in the body. All these things together create that state of concentration. So as you're creating the concentration, you're getting hands-on experience with doing these 3 kinds of fabrication. You're not just looking at them, observing them. You're actually manipulating them to create this feeling of pleasure, not of the flesh. It allows you to at least step back from any pains in the body. So you're not consumed by them. So this is how you learn now not to shoot yourself with arrows before the pains. It makes you less likely to shoot yourself with those arrows after the pains. Even though getting into concentration is not a state of awakening. After all, awakening is another dimension entirely. Outside of space, outside of time. With concentration, you're still in space and time. Even though you're right here in the present moment, you're still in time. But the fact that you have another place to stay, another place to focus, that allows you to understand the suffering you have, the suffering you've been creating, now not to create that suffering. So it gives some importance to this practice of concentration. We focus on meditation, both to get the mind still and to give rise to insight. And as the Buddha said, if you want to have stillness, you want to have insight, you've got to get the mind into jhana. And then from the stillness and the insight, your jhana goes deeper. They help each other along. That way you find yourself shooting yourself less and less and less with these arrows. With the combination of stillness and insight, you finally reach the point where you learn how to stop. There may be some arrows coming in from your past karma. Those are first arrows. But those aren't the ones that weigh down the mind. As long as the second arrows, either prior to or after the first arrow, don't get shot, and there's nothing to burden the mind at all.